From Detroit's Cass Corridor, this is your Daily Detroit News Bite recorded on Saturday, August 11th. I'm Jer. Here's what to know and where to go around Metro Detroit. The Detroit Grand Prix is, in fact, returning to Belle Isle. That's thanks to an agreement announced Friday between race organizers and the Michigan Department of Natural Resources. The 3-year deal, with an option to be extended until 2023, means $450,000 annually for the island. That's more than a third of the state park's operating budget for the entire year. $325,000 of that is an event fee, and $125,000 is specific for Belle Isle projects. The Grand Prix will also continue to host the Grand Premier fundraising event over the course of the new agreement. That event has raised more than $4 million for the Belle Isle Conservancy over the last 5 years. Organizers under the deal also need to reduce their setup and takedown time to 60 days in 2019 and 59 days in 2020 and 2021. They say that's 35 days less than in 2015. The Chevrolet Detroit Grand Prix presented by Lear, I figured I should call it at least once by its official name, will return May 31st through June 2nd, 2019. In 2020, it's going to kick off a very busy June in the city for special events, as the Detroit Auto Show is also moving to that month. Speaking of cars, I-696 construction in Macomb and Oakland counties is about 30% complete, according to the Michigan Department of Transportation. A CNG News article says that the $110 million project's only hard deadline on the contract is in November for construction completion. They also say that the traffic shift from one side to another of I-696 will be made in mid-August. It was going to happen in July. I'll have a link to the full piece in the show notes. Daily Detroit is brought to you in part by Milo Digital, a full-service digital marketing agency. Milo takes your campaign from concept to finish with quality strategy and implementation. You can learn more about them at milodetroit.com. So yesterday, we brought you a story about heated words from Oakland County Executive L. Patterson, saying that Detroit CEOs are aligning against suburban interests. Well, here are new developments. First, in a media interview, Patterson said he'd rather join the Klan than help out this group of CEOs. Then, Patterson, in a statement, apologized for using the Klan reference. Second, the Detroit Regional Chamber, after yesterday's show posted, released a public statement to outline what exactly the group Patterson took objection to was going to do. I've condensed it, but basically, the Chamber said it's a subgroup focused solely on attracting businesses outside of Metro Detroit to the 11-county area, and, quote, will never engage in assisting a company relocate from one part of our region to another, end quote. It's modeled after similar groups in Columbus and Minneapolis. The annual Hatch Detroit contest announced their 10 semi-finalists on Thursday evening. The contest awards $50,000 in cash and a bunch of resources to folks opening a business in Detroit, Highland Park, or Hamtramck. Hatch has been an important driver in the city's retail revitalization. Of the 70 previous competitors, 34 have operating businesses. So here's where you come in. The public is now able to vote for their favorites on hatchdetroit.com to determine the final four. The full lineup is in the show notes. Dan Hasty is the new play-by-play voice of the Detroit Mercy men's basketball team this season on 9:10 a.m. Hasty replaces Cliff Russell, who passed on at the age of 61. Russell was the voice of Titans basketball since 2016. Hasty is from the area, Sterling Heights to be exact, and is in his 4th season as play-by-play broadcaster for the West Michigan Whitecaps. That's the Detroit Tigers' Class A minor league baseball team near Grand Rapids. He also spent 4 years on the air on 97.1 The Ticket, Detroit's top sports station. An improved park at the corner of Woodward and Warren on the Wayne State campus is a step closer to reality. Wayne State's placemaking initiative received an additional $50,000 in foundation grants for park improvements from the Ralph C. Wilson Jr. Legacy Funds. They say there's a new, refined design and the improvements will be made this fall. A little update on the progress of a 26-mile trail loop called the Joe Louis Greenway. The city of Detroit has now officially acquired the abandoned 8-mile-long former Conrail property. It cost $4.5 million to purchase, according to the Detroit Greenways Coalition that wrote the two main grants for the project. What this does is open up $2 million in funding, again from the Ralph C. Wilson Foundation, for planning and construction documents. The city doesn't have the funding yet for construction, but did reapply for a federal grant. The travel service Expedia has named Detroit one of the most underrated cities in America to visit. Just who do they think should vacation in Detroit? Those interested in the environment. Some of the highlights they pull out include public gardens and green spaces, including Lafayette Gardens, the work of greening of Detroit, and they say to visit Townhouse for its, quote, greenhouse-like setting. If you want another recommendation, I'm going to send you to Colors Detroit. Reason? Fresh food from Detroit and Michigan farms, and it's a training program for people to learn the front-of-house side of the restaurant industry and get jobs to help them get back on their feet. So you heard it from them. Go and get into Detroit, friends. Daily Detroit is brought to you in part by Digital Summit Detroit. It'll be September 12th and 13th at Cobo Center, with 55 in-depth sessions on content, SEO, email, emerging tech, and more. Visit Digital Summit Detroit for more info and save $50 with code DD50. The independent co-working space Bamboo Detroit is celebrating 5 years in business. So I caught up with one of the co-founders, Amanda Lewan, to talk about what's changed in Detroit and what it takes to make it here, as well as some new things up their sleeves. The interview was recorded in a conference room at the space. So one of the things to think about with Detroit's comeback is that there's been a lot of progress in the last 5 years. And one of the things that's interesting about looking at a 5-year window is that that is also how long Bamboo Detroit's been around. And for full disclosure, Daily Detroit is a member of Bamboo Detroit. But I wanted to kind of start out with, for the uninitiated, what is Bamboo Detroit?
Yeah, so Bamboo is a shared office space and community for Detroit entrepreneurs. We're really inclusive and affordable, and we have tons of events that support people starting and growing companies and landing and expanding in Detroit. So we started just an idea between 4 friends. At the time, we had a location on Brush Street, and it was not like the most ideal location. We were above a bail bonds and below a music studio.
I remember those days well.
It was very Detroit. And it was really kind of small, and we just grew the community. We just were 4 friends that wanted to work on new ideas. This was 2013, so Dan Gilbert was starting to do more development. There was a lot of buzz, and I think people wanted to start getting engaged. And what was exciting is we gave them a community and a space to get involved with the revitalization downtown.
Why do you think you've been able to make it 5 years? And especially since you started on the early side, right? So a lot of things have started between when you started and now, but you've been able to make it 5 years in a market where a lot of people come in for a year or two and then they're out.
I think we grew very slowly and organically with a community base. So that means listening to our customers and building with them. Definitely also real estate's a very challenging market, and having a space downtown, as it got more expensive, we waited till it was a really good time and we knew the model was working well enough that we could sign a bigger lease. And we're super grateful. We were a Motor City Match grant recipient, which I think is one of the most successful grant programs. I was just reading that's been around 3 years, which is crazy too. I think we just took our time. We proved the model out. We tried not to expand too fast. We waited until we knew we could really build out. And then even here, we did up 1 floor, and then we waited 6 months, added another floor, waited another 6 months, added another. We're actually working on another floor now for duo security. So I don't know. The way we approached it was, not jumping too far ahead and trying to organically grow and bootstrap our way along too.
Was that ever frustrating to wait? Because a lot of people who have moved into Detroit as of late are backed by large money and outside money. Mm-hmm. Was it ever frustrating for you to have to say, okay, well, this is what we can do right now, and this is what we're going to do in the future?
I definitely think so. It's always hard to see. You see a lot more chains and corporate companies coming in, and so sometimes you think, I wish I had those resources. But what makes us unique is the community, is the fact that we're inclusive, is the fact that we're this networking hub and you can connect locally on the ground. And that's something that no one can replicate. So I think you have to focus on, in fact, I think bigger chains like the Regis's and the WeWork being here just help us refine our model so that we can say, look, this is what makes us special and unique. And then as we grow that, we stay focused on that unique culture and community. And that's something that's not everyone can replicate.
From an entrepreneurship perspective, what is the biggest change that you've seen in the last 5 years?
I think we're definitely seeing more density, which is exciting, and more big companies like coming down, which is great to see. But what I personally want to see is more startup homegrown successes. So just last week, was it last week? Yes. Duo Security announced their sale to Cisco for almost $2.5 billion. That's a homegrown tech company started in Ann Arbor, also opened an office in Detroit because they want to see they want to see our whole region working together to build new innovative companies. So I think we need to diversify our economy, have more jobs here, and tech is a big part of that. And so it's very exciting to see such a big success right here in Michigan. That's going to feed the ecosystem. Already, Doug and many of the senior leaders and employees are mentoring and giving back to the up and coming startups. So like Daily Detroit can, turn around and find out like how exactly they raised their Series A or how they, got to X point in revenue. And that sort of experience is so priceless and huge for our ecosystem that we're so pumped that we have that here at Bamboo. And that's the kind of stuff that's going to help move our companies forward.
Speaking of forward, what do you see looking 5 years out for Bamboo Detroit? That's
a great question. I think we'll keep growing our footprint, hopefully here in Detroit and in the region. But more importantly, we'll keep growing the community and we'd love to see 2 or 3 more duos or a variety of companies just growing and succeeding and having sustainable business models, whether they're small businesses or big startups. I think we need all of it in Detroit. And so when our companies succeed, we feel we succeed. So right now we've also launched a nonprofit called Venture Catalyst. That's going to house some of these great programs we've been building year over year, like Detroit Startup Week. We just brought in Afrotech Detroit. That's one of the biggest tech conferences in the Valley. And, in Silicon Valley, we have a huge diversity problem where numbers are just like really sad. Like only 2 or 3% of big companies are minorities. And in Detroit, I think we can make it more inclusive from the ground up. And we're super pumped about that. Our members here are training tech talent. They're teaching students how to code in Detroit. And so 75% of people from the Midwest, or 75 of the attendees at Afrotech in Silicon Valley are from the Midwest. So people are flying out from these Midwestern cities to connect and grow their companies. We need that here in Detroit. We need to elevate all of us. So that conference is coming up on the 18th. We're super pumped for it. It's only $50, and you're going to get access to national and local speakers on how to start a company. And all are welcome, though it's focused on minority tech entrepreneurs.
And if we talk about diversity for a second, one statistic that I thought was really interesting, we tweeted out on your 5th anniversary or the day after, your co-working space is much more, and community space is much more diverse than many of the places that are being covered. Can you talk a little bit about why that is and kind of what those numbers are?
Yeah, absolutely. So a big part of Bamboo's mission is to build an inclusive tech and business hub in Detroit. So to be inclusive, we need to represent the city of Detroit. We started with a diverse founding team, and I think that was really critical. But we've been very intentional to support other partners like Food Lab and Build, who are on the ground building the ecosystem with us, and keep affordable price points. Often other places can be really expensive and flashy, and that's not welcoming to everybody. But our programming and our approach, I think, has worked. We're about 65% women-owned companies, 50% identifies people of color, and half live in the city, half live in the metro suburbs. So I think it's really important, and it's one of the biggest challenges Detroit has to face is as we keep growing, how do we stay inclusive and accessible to everybody?
And if people want to know more information, where can they find it?
Come visit us, bamboodetroit.com, or we're at 1420 Washington. You can stop in anytime and say hi.
Well, that's it for our show today. Before we get out of here, some thanks are in order as it's the end of the week. Cheyenne Nocerini, Sven Gustafson, our guide in Gojai, Nuri Gojai, Bob and Dave over at Podcast Detroit, and our logo was done by Mashara Walker. Our sponsors this week include Milo Digital, Digital Summit Detroit, and Falling Down Beer Company. And of course, our Daily Detroit members. Being people-powered is part of what makes this independent media project work. If you want to know more about that, just go to dailydetroit.com/membership. Thanks so much for listening to the Daily Detroit News Bite. I'm Jeremiah Stays. Sven comes back on Monday. Take care of each other, and we'll see you around Detroit.
You're listening to the Podcast Detroit Network. Visit www.podcastdetroit.com for more information.